Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, but I'm on a panel where I'm outside my comfort zone. Nevertheless, it's still a pleasure to be here, and I've learned a lot in the last 2 days, and I hope I'll be able to contribute a couple of thoughts and questions to put on the agenda today. So my presentation is going to be from the perspective of international human rights law. And the first thing I want to emphasize is something Brian Grimm has written about, and I think has been part of our discussions over the past 2.5 days, but I think insufficiently emphasized. I would like to suggest that there's a big distinction, and there's an important distinction to be drawn between discrimination based on religion or belief, which draws from social hostility, and that which draws from state restrictions. And it's not to say that the two are completely separate from one another, nor that one doesn't lead to another. Obviously, state restrictions where there is a project of violating rights on the basis of religion or belief. I want to agree with Lena that that's a very important topic and we can't separate the two. Where the state itself is involved in a project of discrimination, then of course it gives a green light to social actors and the public at large to also discriminate with no penalty. So the two are linked, but I want to draw the emphasis on why these distinctions should remain. So I wouldn't agree with the claim that freedom of religion or belief is the supreme or superior or greater human rights. I don't think human rights law can create a hierarchy because, its whole rallying call is universality and indivisibility. However, freedom of religion or belief, when it is denied, means that people within that jurisdiction do not have the possibility of self-defining. A core aspect of human development is therefore denied. People cannot explore the big questions of life. Of course, they may wish to think that it's all fanciful and untrue, but they are not even given the permission to explore the big questions, to explore what animates their life and their purpose, what happens afterwards, what links us, what makes us human, and what connects us. So when freedom of religion or belief is denied, human development cannot exist. But when that is denied by the state, then, whether we're talking about women, faith, all sustainable development, if the state itself is involved in the project of discrimination, then people cannot define as members of that religion or belief. Their organizations are not recognized. The category of discrimination is denied, and therefore there is no space for those actors to come together to organize, to raise money, to give, to serve humanity in that context. They do not even exist in that sphere. So state restriction is key. And I'm going to turn us to a 1-minute film to illustrate this, not because it is the only example, but because it's a 1-minute example that emphasizes this point. And then we'll come back to the discussion. Package. 110 years ago, my grandmother in Shiraz went to school and stones were thrown at her because at that time girls shouldn't have an education and only Christian and Baha'i children would go to school. 110 years later, I suppose she's very shocked that people in her city who share her religion still cannot benefit from education. But this is nothing to do with Islam. It's just one example of persecution on grounds of religion or belief. I myself have an extended family, half of which are Shia Muslim, the other half of which are Baha'i. So one half in one country is persecuting the other, but Shias too are suffering discrimination around the world in other contexts. So as Lena said before, discrimination, respect for freedom of religion or belief is something that we all need. But what does human rights law do when it brings together the questions of women, faith, and sustainable development? Well, it has these as very separate categories, and none of these categories have the prototype or the picture of women acting on the basis of their religion or belief to promote sustainable development. Now, obviously, we know that women in faith communities around the world for thousands of years have been active, and there's nothing that I'm suggesting here that is denying that reality, but it is not a reality that human rights law has recognized or that in its promotion or protection activities is very visible. And we have to ask what the reason for that is. Now, women are protected under the CEDAW Convention. The CEDAW Convention doesn't engage with religion. Faith is protected under a 1981 declaration on the elimination of discrimination on the basis of religion or belief, and women are not mentioned in that declaration. And development, well, in international human rights law, the greatest home for development and sustainable development would be economic, social, and cultural rights. Yes, they do acknowledge the grounds of discrimination on grounds of gender and faith. We could say that it is women and development that have become, faith and development that have become connected in the literature over the past 10 years or so in the recognition, as Sherry said earlier, in the recognition of faith-based organizations in development. But why is it that there isn't a visibility given in international human rights law to women, faith, and social development? Where it finds a better home, well, perhaps before moving on, I should say that under the 1981 declaration in Article 6, there is recognition of a variety of ways where religion or belief is practiced and manifested. And two elements there do acknowledge the existence of religions being engaged in charitable activities, in raising funding, and in promoting the social will, if you like. But it is not very pronounced. And it's actually in the Human Rights Defenders Declaration that there is a stronger basis for the protection and the promotion of the rights of women of faith involved in sustainable development. And I think it's key to bring to the discussion the important principle of equality and non-discrimination in all such actions, because again, as speakers before me said, that without equality and non-discrimination, then the involvement of faith-based communities, whether as women or men, will be unpalatable and very difficult. Now, if there isn't a picture or a strong trace of women, faith, and sustainable development in international human rights law standards, then what is our picture of women, faith, and sustainable development? Is it the importance and the visibility of this matter at the international level, in which case perhaps we are looking for inclusion and representation of women and the presence of women at the international level? Is it the right of women to participate in policy formulation regarding sustainable development and to be involved in its implementation, et cetera, et cetera? This might be under the heading of the participation of women in political leadership and other leadership and political life at large. So this is what it might look like. For the first time in 110 years, the Parliament of World Religions last month in Salt Lake City had an inaugural women's assembly, and there was a lot of enthusiasm in receiving that, and hopefully it will be continued in the practice of the parliaments of the world's religions. However, it was very interesting on the evening of the inaugural that the opening ceremony had no women at all. But never mind, it's, let's encourage positive steps. That's the international level. What about the local level? And I want to turn to a Nobel Prize winner from 90 years ago and a novelist, Pearl Buck, who won the Nobel Peace Prize for Literature in 1938, to prompt us to think about women at the grassroots doing social development, women of faith active at the local level. And I read these books when I was a teenager, and I have never got the picture out of my mind. These books are Fighting Angel and The Exile, is inspired by the story of her parents as missionaries in China. And it tells the story of this husband and wife couple in China in the, before the 1920s, in the early 1900s, late 1800s, early 1900s. And it tells the same story from the point of view of the husband and the point of view of the wife. And they're dramatically different characters. So Andrew is out there always reading the Bible and saving heathen souls. And Carrie is involved at the grassroots, passionately concerned about the day-to-day lives of the Chinese around her. She is anxious and concerned about foot binding, about education and health. And they have many arguments, and they see the world and their faith in dramatically different ways. Does this kind of very exaggerated position and novel about the different insights of men and women of faith at the grassroots have any resonance today? A very moving part of the book, actually, is when Carrie dies, and Andrew avoids going to Carrie's deathbed until she has already passed away. He doesn't shed any tears. He goes immediately and reads the Bible, and then his daughter never knows whether he's grieving or not, because he's just not a very emotive man. So does that tell us something about the quality or the manner in which women of faith engage in sustainable development? Is the focus that they have, and are they more concerned about day-to-day reality? Do they act in a way that is closer to the community, less discriminating, and more inclusive? I'm also going to refer very briefly to 1325 in asking this question, because in terms of peace building and security, 1325 recognized a qualitative benefit that women bring to peace building, to peacemaking, to peace negotiations. Is there a qualitative benefit that women bring to faith and sustainable development? If so, should we be studying it in more detail, isolating out the gender factor, and speaking more about it? If it is true that there are, the feminine quality that Sherry referred to, and a qualitative difference in how women do sustainable development when they act on the basis of faith, then the qualities that it's bringing to the fore are the qualities of relevance, of empowerment of others, of consulting in a deeper way with the communities that are being engaged with, engendering trust and inclusivity, and really living the notion of service in a more selfless way. I don't want to make too sharp a distinction between men and women, but if these are some of the qualities that are emphasized more by women, then surely this is exactly the direction we should be taking this discussion. Thank you.